This is Tipping Point Radio. I'm Craig Merriweather, and you're listening to The Mastermind Show. You may have heard of the honeymoon effect, a state of bliss, passion, energy, and health resulting from a huge love in your life. Your life is so beautiful that you can't wait to start a new day and thank the universe that you are alive. Think back on the most spectacular love affair of your life, the big one that toppled you head over heels. For most, it was a time of heartfelt bliss, robust health, and abundant energy. Life was so beautiful that you couldn't wait to bound out of bed in the morning and experience more heaven on earth. Unfortunately for most, the honeymoon effect is frequently short-lived. Imagine what your day-to-day experience would be like if you can maintain the honeymoon effect throughout your whole life. So I gotta ask, what if the honeymoon effect was not a chance event or a coincidence, but a personal creation? How do we lose the honeymoon effect in the first place, and is it possible to manifest it on purpose? With me today is Dr. Bruce Lipton, internationally recognized authority on bridging science and spirit and a leading voice in new biology. Bruce was on the faculty of the University of Wisconsin School of Medicine and later performed groundbreaking stem cell research at Stanford University. He is the best-selling author of The Biology of Belief, Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and Miracles, Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future and a Way to Get There From Here, and The Honeymoon Effect, The Science of Creating Heaven on Earth. And now here's my interview with Dr. Bruce Lipton. Hello, Bruce. Welcome to the show.
Craig, I really want to thank you for this opportunity. I just love the chance to talk about this new biology and the relationship of love and harmony on this planet. So thank you for giving me this chance.
Well, the book is titled The Honeymoon Effect, and I think a lot of us know that term as the bliss period after one gets married, and maybe it lasts a week, a month, maybe a year, and then the challenges of life kind of set in, the bills and the work schedules, and maybe you have kids, and then maybe it's not so blissful and happy, and maybe, as some people might say, the rut starts to set in. You say that we can keep that bliss period and that happiness and that love full-time, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and I was wondering if you can explain how we can do that and what you mean by that.
Well, Craig, the first thing that's really important to recognize is that honeymoon effect when we fell in love was not a chance or a coincidence. We actually created it. Our nervous system was programmed to manifest that experience. The unfortunate part is when it disappears, as you mentioned, it's also part of a programming that we have. The relevance is really, for me, simple and profound, and that is if you understand how you created this, and you understand the reason why you lost it, then obviously what this means is with that knowledge, you should be able to create this and maintain it for as long as you live. Now, I can't say that's forever because I've only into it about 18 years right now, but being on a honeymoon for 18 years has been a real wonderful experience and a surprise to me because I never really even believed in this kind of love reality. I always thought that was like a Hollywood theme or something like that, but there's a science behind it. And with that science, we are really free to change our world and live that experience.
Well, I like that it's science-based, and I love all the research you do on this work because a lot of what I try to do on this show is not just provide people with the, pardon the expression, the woo-woo theories of how to live a better life. I like to have the direct science behind it, and you've done the work to show how this is done.
Well, it's not only I've done the work. The surprising part is the scientific theoretical stuff. When I actually directly applied it, profoundly changed my life because I said I wasn't really into believing this whole love story because I was chasing it for so many years, and then finally resigned to the fact, oh yeah, that's a romanticized version of life, but it's not real, and it is real, that's the most exciting thing.
Okay, well, someone may look at your life and say, well, you have a pretty awesome life. You go around the world doing these speaking engagements, and you get to go to some pretty awesome places, and you write books, and you get to be on TV and stuff, and so you have a pretty cool life, but my life, maybe is not so great. I got a job I don't like, and my relationship's not doing so well. My kids are a hassle, and
yeah, Oh, that sounds like regular life to me, Craig.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that part.
Yeah.
What we have to recognize is this: is that, first of all, there's been a misunderstanding in relation to genetics. And I want to bring that up first because there's a perception that people have been programmed with is that your genes not only control your physical expression, but they also control your behavioral and emotional characteristics. And when you buy into that story of what we refer to as genetic determinism, the belief that genes determine the character of our lives, what you're really buying into is a story of victimization, meaning this, as far as we know, we didn't pick the genes we came with. And if we don't like the characteristics we have, you can't go out and change your genes. And then all of a sudden you start to realize, oh my God, my life is being programmed by these genes that were passed down through my lineage. And I, therefore, I'm a victim of heredity, meaning if there's cancer or some disease running in my family, I anticipate that the genetic cause of that will be transferred to me after conception, and I will be carrying those genes, and therefore my fate is somewhat determined. People buy into that. And as soon as they buy into that, that victimization, they become disempowered because they believe I have no control over my life. Well, the fortunate part about my own personal research on cloning stem cells revealed that this concept is totally false. Genes control nothing. Genes are blueprints. That's exactly what they are. There's exact references. A gene is a blueprint. And I say, well, why is that irrelevant? Because I say, well, go into an architect's office and she's working on a blueprint, and you ask her, you say, is your blueprint on or off? And then she looks at you, with that funny look like, what are you talking about? It's a blueprint. There's no on and off. And I go, precisely. Genes carry information, but they themselves are not self-actualizing, meaning genes don't make decisions. Genes don't give you cancer. For example, especially in the news as of late, Angelina Jolie had a double mastectomy because she says, I carry the breast cancer gene and I don't want to get the cancer, so I'm going to remove my breast. Mastectomy is a very clean-sounding word. If I give you a more down-to-earth, I will mutilate myself to prevent this cancer. Well, that really, unfortunately, sent a very incorrect message out to the world because it said, oh, these genes are going to control her, therefore she's going to have to remove these breasts to prevent the breast cancer. What people don't recognize, and should be really critical and clear, is that only 50% of the women that have the BRCA1 gene that Angelina Jolie has, only 50% ever get the cancer. And why that's important is that means 50% of the people with the gene don't get the cancer. And why is that relevant? Because it says the gene didn't cause the cancer. It was the gene plus something else that led to the cancer. Having the gene does not predispose you to cancer. Having the behavior that will elicit that gene is what causes the cancer. And why is that important? Because if it's behavior, then it's something I can change. And that's why 50% of the people that have the gene, their behavior, their way of life, doesn't support the cancer. And so what I really want people to back off on is that genes are controlling your life. The new science is called epigenetics. And it sounds like genetics, but it's a slight difference. But that slight difference is revolutionary. So when, Craig, if I say this is under genetic control, what I'm saying is literally this is controlled by genes. And I say, well, what about epigenetic control? And I go, this is a revolution because epi means above. So if I say epigenetic control, what I'm actually saying is control above the genes. And now we have a clear understanding, and that is the environment. And more importantly, our perception of the environment controls our genetics and our behavior. And this is really important for people to understand. Because when I teach genetic control, I say, well, you're a victim. Genes control you, and whatever genes you got, that's your life. Epigenetics, the new science, says, no, if you change your environment or you change your perception, you change your genetic activity. Therefore, rather than victims, we are actually masters of our genes because we're the ones that control perception and environment. And when it comes down to understanding relationships, this is exactly the same phenomenon, that we control the expression of our lives and especially how we relate to others. And when we understand that, then we can start to see how come we can create a honeymoon effect? How come we lose a honeymoon effect? And maybe even more importantly, why do we even create the honeymoon effect? Because this is a part of nature. Nature intended us to experience the honeymoon. Nature intended us to maintain the honeymoon experience, not just for a short period of time like most people experience it, but nature intended us to have the honeymoon period for a long time. And I'll give you a reason why, very simply. There's something called the biological imperative. The biological imperative of the drives of living organisms. We have a drive, for example, to breathe air. We have a drive to drink water. We have a drive to get food. And these biological imperatives are concerned with survival, the drives and needs for survival. Well, when we talk about the biological imperative, we can talk about the survival of the individual. But science also refers to the biological imperative in regard to survival of the species. Now, the survival of the individual are the drives, as I said, that we as individuals need to maintain, such as breathing air and getting water and eating food. These are necessary for our survival as individuals. But nature is also concerned with survival of the species. So all of a sudden I say, well, what's related to survival of the species? I say reproduction. And then I say, okay, well, nature wants us to reproduce. And I go, yeah, all organisms are driven to reproduce. But there's an interesting thing. As you go into lower organisms, let's just say like a frog, frogs reproduce. And it's interesting because frog mating is very quick, very short. After they mate, they don't sit down and have a cigarette and a glass of wine and talk about the wonderful relationship they have, because simply this. Frogs, once they mate and their eggs get fertilized, do not need to be parents, because a frog egg is self-developing, and when the tadpole hatches out, it's self-capable of surviving. So there's no need for mother and father frogs to tend the babies. They just have a short, quick relationship, the eggs get fertilized, and they're on their way. And I say, well, okay, that supports survival of the species. But here's the important part about why we have a honeymoon effect. And that is, as you go up the evolutionary scale, the more complex an organism, the less well-developed it is when it's born. It's not complete. So after an organism is born, there's a period where it has to develop enough to become independent. So let's say chicken hatches out of an egg. It itself is not really to be ready to become independent. What it will do, it will actually imprint with the mother. The mother will be guiding its behavior to get it off the ground. And parenting for a chicken it's not years, it's a relatively short time. But when you get to a human, when a human baby is born, it is completely incapable of surviving on its own. And in fact, for a human to survive on its own, generally it takes anywhere from 13 to 15 years of life experiences before they're independent. Well, why is that important? And the answer is simply this. Nature needs to propagate the species. And when it comes to human, nature is saying we need parental care for a minimum of 13 years or more. And then I say, well, how does nature ensure that a couple stays together? And then I go, oh, they got some cool ideas. Nature, when you fall in love, there are chemicals coming from the brain associated with your relationship that secure and have the intention of keeping a couple together for a minimum of 13 years as the child is maturing. And I say, okay, here's, for example, I say, as you're sitting there and your eyes are closed, and then you open up your eyes and you see someone you love, there are several very significant chemicals released by the brain in the presence of love. One of them is dopamine, which is pleasure. Yes, pleasure. When we're in love, we experience pleasure. This is nature's way of suggesting, hey, if you really like life and you really like to be in pleasure, then being in a relationship is really good. And that's why we're driven into relationships, because there's a pleasure that comes from that. And that is nature's way of hooking you into staying in a relationship throughout the development of your child. So I say, okay, dopamine is released when you fall in love. Another hormone that's released when you fall in love is called vasopressin. And vasopressin increases your sexuality and your attractiveness. So basically, when you're falling in love, you become more sexual for that reproduction purposes, and attractiveness is meaning that you and your partner are focusing on each other because of this magnetic attraction, so to speak. So I say, okay, dopamine, pleasure, vasopressin, sexuality, attractiveness. And then I go, an interesting one is oxytocin. And oxytocin is nature's way of saying bonding. I bond with this person. You say, why would you bond with this person? The answer is because this person and you together create pleasure. And nature says, okay, good. You're really working this out. What we're going to do is put oxytocin in. This will really strengthen your bonds. And this is what holds you together for a long period of time. And then lastly, the one that I would mention is serotonin. And serotonin is very interesting because it's the hormone related to addiction. If you're addicted to heroin or cocaine or one of these kinds of drugs, you're addicted to it because the drug gives you some experience, and the serotonin as an addicting agent says, seek this experience. So serotonin says, find where you get this pleasure and then go for it. And so it's an addiction. And interestingly enough, serotonin is a major chemical released when you fall in love. Point, we're addicted to this love. We're bonding with oxytocin to this individual, the source of this love. We're getting vasopressin and dopamine, which is the pleasure from this love. And nature is conspiring with all these chemicals to say, this is what you're looking for, a relationship long enough to allow this child to develop. So I say, okay, there's a whole chemical drive to create the honeymoon relation. But there's more to it, and this is where the problems come into the field. And can I go on with this, or am I just?
Oh no, this is fantastic.
All right, because here's the cool part: the mind is involved, and the function of the mind is to take your beliefs, your programs that you grew up with, and turn them into reality. Okay, and there's two parts to the mind. There's the conscious mind, which is the latest evolution of the brain, and that's connected to your personal identity. So each human is a different entity, and the conscious brain, which is associated with a lobe of tissue behind your forehead called the prefrontal cortex, is the seat of your personal identity, your source, your spiritual connection. That's what makes you unique. That's about 10% of the brain, the conscious mind. The remaining 90% of the brain was there before consciousness evolved, and we refer to it as the subconscious mind. Well, here's the profoundly important difference between the two minds. They have different functions, and they learn in different ways. We have grouped them through history as, the mind, that conscious and subconscious are interconnected and are one and the same. And this has created a lot of problems because if we educate or activate our conscious mind, there's a tendency to believe that, the subconscious mind is in agreement with what's going on. Because no, two separate minds. So let's talk about the functional difference. The conscious mind is creative. And what I mean by that is this is what separates humans from lower organisms. Lower organisms are more or less stimulus response, reflex behavior, input, output. But when you have a conscious mind, you can, between the stimulus and the output, you can create a different response. So this frees us from just stimulus response behavior. Excuse me. And the relevance about all this is that the conscious mind, being creative, now think about this, is the source of our wishes, our desires, and our aspirations for life. This is creative. I say, Craig, tell me what you want from your life. And you say, I want to have a great relationship, and I want to have a great job, and I want to be healthy. And I go, good, these are creative wishes. These are creative desires. And I say that the source of your wish and your desire is the conscious mind. And I go, this is really cool. And this is the conscious mind that drives us to look for those relationships that the biological imperative is saying, look, in your life, not only do you have to stay alive, but you really want to contribute to the survival of the species, so you need to find a relationship. And conscious mind is what allows the creativity of finding and expressing the relationship. In contrast, the subconscious mind is the habit mind. It's got very little creativity, but it's primarily habits. It's sort of like an old-fashioned jukebox where you push a button and you play a program, and you push this button, you play a different program. Well, the subconscious mind is filled with programs. And the programs in the subconscious mind are fundamentally, the first programs are the programs that we acquire as children of how to be a functional member of a family and a community and a culture, and we have to learn how the ropes of being an active member of our community. So I say, oh, so there are behavioral programs in there. I go, yeah. And I say, well, where do these fundamental programs come from? So once we elicit this, and then we go back to the conscious and subconscious, you'll see A, how you created the honeymoon, and unfortunately B, why we generally lose that. And it goes like this. In order to be conscious, you actually have to have some programs. In other words, let's just say a child, the moment it's born, could speak. And the child's just coming out of the birth canal, and you say to the child, tell me something. And the child looks up at you and goes, I don't know anything. I just got here. And so basically, to be conscious and creative, you have to have some programs. So nature has designed our nervous system to download fundamental programs during the first 7 years of life, and then consciousness as a neurological activity begins to be the predominant activity of the brain after 7 years of age. So the first 7 years, nature designs the brain to download behavior, and it does it simply by having the brain function at a lower vibrational frequency as determined by something called electroencephalograph, EEG, where you put wires on a person's head and you read their brain activity. Well, nature has revealed that the first 7 years of your life, your EEG activity is in a vibrational frequency called theta. And theta is imagination. So yeah, kids between 2 and 7 especially are mixing the real world and the imaginary world because their brain is functioning at theta, and that's why a kid is riding a broom, calling it a horse, and then the parent says, "Give me the broom," and the child looks and says, "What broom? This is a horse," because their imagination has through theta has turned the broom into a horse. So that's imagination. More importantly, Craig, is that theta is hypnosis. And why is this important? Because listen, if you want to be a functional member of a family, a community, a society, you have to learn the rules. And I say, well, how many rules are there to learn to be one of these functional members? I go, thousands of rules. I say, well, how does an infant learn thousands of rules to become a functional member? And the answer is this: you don't have to teach them like schoolroom. All you have to do is act them out, because the child's brain in theta is recording behavior. So a child focuses on their father if it's a male generally, and focuses on their mother's behavior if they're generally female. And the significance is this, is that the behavior that goes into our subconscious programs, which are stimulus response programs, primarily the behavior didn't come from us. It came from observing other people. And so the fundamental behavior in our subconscious programming doesn't necessarily have your wishes and desires in it. It has behavior programmed from other people. Okay, so now here's the story. When you fall in love, the chemistry of your nervous system releasing those wonderful elements of love, the energy reading system, the vibes, good vibes, bad vibes that we read as information, lead us to an individual. And if we're really into it, what happens is this: no matter how bad your life might be for a moment, when you fall in love, you experience, as you mentioned when we started, the honeymoon effect, which is, think about it, several aspects. Number one, the hormones released by the brain in love are hormones that enhance our health. And that's why people glow when they're in love, because the hormones from the brain are feeding the cells nourishment, saying, yeah, you're following the right path to the biological imperative, and you're healthy and ready to go. So first part of honeymoon, feeling really healthy and alive. Second part, abundant energy. And I joke in the lecture because I say, come on, I know when you first fell in love, you had a lot of energy because you made love for days without stopping for food or sleep, and you had all this energy. And then thirdly, life is so beautiful that it's the equivalent of heaven on earth. And I said, well, how did this work? And the answer is this. On our regular day-to-day life, while the conscious mind is creative and has our wishes and desires, science has found that in regular life, only 5% of our behavior, this is important, only 5% of our behavior comes from the conscious mind. The conscious mind, again, wishes, desires, aspirations, positive thinking. Only 5% of our life is controlled by our personal wishes and desires. I say, why so little? And the answer is related to this. The conscious mind can think. And when it's thinking, by definition, it's not paying attention. And when it's not paying attention, you don't just stop because you're having a thought, like you're walking down the street and a thought hits you and then you freeze while you handle the thought. If you have a thought, you just continue walking or going in a direction, or if you're doing your job, you just continue that. And the reason is this. When the conscious mind is preoccupied with thinking, behavior is controlled by the default, the subconscious mind. And all of a sudden I say, this is where science has recognized that we're only conscious 5% of the time. That means, just important, you're only running your life based on wishes and desires 5%. 95% of the time your mind is in thought. So 95% of the time, the default programming of the subconscious runs the show. And I go, well, why is that relevant? I go, because the default program is subconscious didn't come from your wishes and desires. They came from observing other people. We were programmed. And it's interesting because most people are familiar with the movie The Matrix. And they talk about, it's like a science fiction movie. And I go, no, The Matrix is not a science fiction movie. The Matrix is a documentary. We have been programmed. And in the movie, they say if you take the blue pill, you stay in the program and life goes on just the way it's always been. But if you take the red pill, you get out of the programming. And science has now found something so exciting, and it's this. When we fall in love, when we first fall in love, remember, you meet somebody who manifests your wishes and desires. And all of a sudden, your wishes and desires that you were looking for, this great relationship, is right in front of your face. Interestingly, science has recognized that when you fall in love, you're not staying conscious only 5% of the time. But when you fall in love, you stay conscious over 90% of the time, using the conscious mind and not defaulting to the subconscious. I go, why is that relevant? Because in a regular day-to-day life, only 5% of my life is concerned with wishes and desires. But when I fall in love, at that moment, I stay conscious. I stay what is called mindful. And that means what I'm wanting in my life is in front of my face. So why would I go off into thought? I keep my thoughts present in the current moment. I stay mindful. And I say, why is that relevant? Because up to 90% of our behavior when we fall in love is now controlled by the conscious mind. And I say, why is that relevant? And I say, 90% of your behavior is trying to create what? Wishes, desires, and aspirations. When two people are operating from their conscious mind, then they're operating from their creative wishes and desires. And guess what? When two people do that, they're not playing the programs. And when they're not playing the programs, what did they manifest? Heaven on earth. And I say, well, this is really cool. This is the equivalent of taking the red pill. You got out of the program because your love is keeping your conscious mind up front. Okay, called the honeymoon. Yes, two people manifesting wishes and desires indeed create heaven on earth. Then I say, well, how come the honeymoon goes away? I go, Because at some point, you still have to deal with life. You got to pay the rent, got to fix the car, you got to do your chores. And I say, relevance of that? And the answer is simply this: the relevance is that when you are caught up with thoughts about fixing the car, the chores, whatever it is, I say, wait a minute, your thoughts are no longer, your conscious mind's no longer staying in the present moment. Your conscious mind is now deep into thought. And I go, yeah, when that happens, we default to the subconscious. I go, oh, problem. Because the behavior in the subconscious isn't necessarily our behavior. We downloaded it from other people. And therefore, their behavior doesn't necessarily match our wishes and desires. And as a result, the moment that happens, we now go back into the regular life. It's like taking the blue pill. We're back into regular life. And I go, here's the difference. And I'm sorry I'm going on so much about this, Craig, but I'm trying to compress everything in a few minutes. It goes like this. Everyday life, you're running 95% from programs that you got from other people that don't answer your wishes and desires. Life is hard. You fall in love, and for the first time in your life, you stay mindful, meaning you don't default to the subconscious, which means then all of your behavior is controlled by your conscious mind, wishes and desires, and you manifest heaven on earth. So the honeymoon starts with two people only operating from their conscious mind. So there's two minds, two people, the conscious minds creating wishes and desires together. And then I say, but as life gets busy and the conscious mind starts to wander into thought, we introduce the subconscious minds. So each partner has a subconscious mind. So the honeymoon starts with two conscious minds. And when the subconscious minds kick in and start introducing behavior that doesn't represent who we are, then these behaviors, which psychologists tell us in the subconscious, 70% or more of the programmed behaviors are disempowering and self-sabotaging and limiting. And I say, wow, you created honeymoon with conscious mind. You drop into the subconscious when your conscious mind's thinking, and now you're playing programs, 70% of which are self-sabotaging. And introducing those behaviors from the subconscious mind, introducing into your relationship behaviors that you got from your mother, your father, your family, and community, these behaviors take us away from that love. And all of a sudden, the honeymoon starts to disappear for a simple reason. Behaviors show up in the subconscious mind that were never present during the honeymoon. If some of the behaviors of the subconscious mind were present on your first date, you may not have had a second date. Somebody would say, wow, that's a really crummy behavior. But they didn't show up because you didn't default to the subconscious mind. You're experiencing the love of wishes and desires, and it's great. And then, because life is busy and the conscious mind is wandering, we start introducing these behaviors that we get from our family. And these behaviors, or many of them, are very negative, as I said. And I love it because, let's say my loving partner and I are getting along really wonderfully, and the honeymoon is really great. And at this point, I'm thinking about, let's say, fixing the car. And my partner comes up and asks me a simple, wonderful question. And while I'm thinking, I turn around, I go, blah, blah, blah. And she looks at me, and this is the universal line, and she says, who are you? Where did that come from? And now the monkey wrench in the mix that throws everything, just messes up everything, and it goes like this. When your conscious mind is working and controlling you, you're totally aware of everything you're doing. But when your conscious mind is in thought and you default into the subconscious programming, by definition, the conscious mind's not paying attention because it's caught up in thought. So the behavior that plays when conscious mind is busy, the behavior from the subconscious is playing without us even observing it. Relevance here, Craig, is simple. I give this in the lecture, and I say to people about understanding the invisible character of this. I say, listen, go back into your life. I'm sure you were close to a particular friend. You knew your friend's behavior very, very well, and you happen to know your friend's parent. And one day, you see that your friend has the exact same behavior as their parent. So you volunteer something like, hey, Bill, you're just like your dad. And then you back away from Bill, because Bill's the guy who goes ballistic. How can you compare me to my dad? And everyone laughs. And I say, this is the most profound story I can leave you with for this reason. Everybody else can see that Bill behaves like his dad. The only one who doesn't see it is Bill. I say, how did this occur? And I go, A, he got his dad's behavior during developmental programming. B, he defaults to the subconscious where these programs are when he's not paying attention. C, when the behavior from the subconscious is playing, Bill himself is the only one that doesn't see it. And the reason is because his mind is in thought, and that's why he's playing it. And the significance is then 95% of our behavior is generally unobserved by us, simply because why are we playing it? Conscious mind's busy. Then it doesn't see it. And then I go, yeah, and if you recognize 70% of these subconscious programs are negative, then you start to realize there's this honeymoon you created because you stayed conscious. And then once your mind starts to travel, you introduce these negative behaviors and you don't see them yourself. And all of a sudden you start to realize you're creating behavior that could destroy a relationship, and you were the only one that doesn't see it. And that's why you feel like, I don't know what this person's talking about when they accuse me of not being myself. I'm always myself. And I go, no, 95% of the time, you don't see it. You're actually somebody else's self because you're playing these programs. I'm sorry I'm running off like this, Craig.
Oh, no, this is perfect. And it gives some hope, but it's also, it feels like a heavy weight. It's like, well, if 95% of my day is kind of going through the unconscious mind, how can I deal with this?
Well, there are two things. One of them was, what happened when you actually got into the honeymoon? How did your life go from everyday blah, blah, blah life to this, oh my God, I'm living in heaven? And the answer was, you stayed mindful. It's a practice where you try to keep your conscious mind in the present. It's very difficult, though, in this world because we're so busy that it's very hard not to let your conscious mind wander off in thought. So, mindfulness is an exercise. The most important thing we have to understand is this. We can reprogram the subconscious mind and put new programs in over the old ones. And I say, why is that relevant? Here's a simple result. If I replace my limiting programs from my subconscious with the beliefs in my conscious mind of my wishes and my desires, why is that relevant? Because if my wishes and desires are now programmed in the subconscious, here's the fun part. Whether I'm paying attention and running my life with my conscious wishes and desires, or whether my conscious mind is engaged in thought and I play my subconscious, which now plays wishes and desires, then I'm playing wishes and desires 100% of the time. All of a sudden it says the wishes and desires that led you to the honeymoon can be maintained every day of your life when we eliminate the negative programs in the subconscious. And all of a sudden it says, yes, a honeymoon intended by nature was not to be a short-term thing. The honeymoon experience, all the pleasure and the health and everything associated with it, was designed to be a lifelong experience. It's only the bad programming that has gotten in the way. And since it's just programming, we can reprogram, and as a result, have a honeymoon experience that lasts every day of your life for as long as you live on this planet.
Sounds like a lot of work.
Well, that would be if we talk about, this. You're really right, Craig, because when you talk about changing beliefs, the first thing everybody says, oh, that's hard. That's really difficult. And the reason is this, because number one, we've made an error all these years. We made an error that said the subconscious mind is connected to the conscious mind. And therefore, if the conscious mind becomes aware, we anticipate that the subconscious mind should adjust its behavior. And I go, that's the problem. The problem is this. The conscious mind is creative, and it learns in a creative fashion. So, Craig, for example, the conscious mind can learn by reading a self-help book. Let's just say that, for example. And then in the audience, I say, how many people have read a self-help book? And all the hands go up. And then I say, how many people's lives have changed after you read the self-help book? And almost all the hands go down. And I go, this is a reflection of something very important. The conscious mind, being creative, can learn from reading the book. It can learn from going to a lecture. Learn to listen to your show, Craig. I can educate your conscious mind. But the problem about that is not the way the subconscious learns. So I can easily educate the conscious mind, but it has no changing effect on the subconscious. And that's where our biggest problem comes from, because I say, oh, you read the book. You got 100 on a test about all the content. That means you really understand. And I say, but with all that understanding in your conscious mind, how come you still have the same life, the same old life, and yet you're totally aware? So the bigger problem is we readily provide awareness to our conscious mind, but our life stays the same. And I go, because the subconscious mind does not learn that way. The subconscious mind's a habit mind. Relevance is this. I don't want to change my habits very easily. If I learned, if I learned how to walk when I was an infant, I don't want to have to relearn how to walk every day. So I put a program in my subconscious mind that controls my muscles and everything, allows me to stand up and walk. Once I learned that, it's now a program. I never have to learn it again. Once I learned how to drive a car, I didn't have to learn it again. The subconscious mind has these wonderful programs. They're resistant to change because these habits are important to maintain what we're doing. Learning how to walk, you don't want to forget how to walk or alter the program. It works. So the subconscious mind grabs onto a program and doesn't want to change. But I say, yeah, but you can put programs in it. That's how you got them. So I say, how did we reprogram the mind? I go, number one, we reprogram the mind. The first way we programmed it, the first 7 years, is we get into a state of hypnosis, which is theta. And I go, okay, you can see a hypnotherapist. And I also go, no, you know what? Every night as you go to bed, your EEG goes from a high vibrational frequency, beta, which is the active work mode of the mind. And as you start to relax, you go into alpha, which is calm consciousness. And then as you start to get ready to go to sleep, the brain lowers the frequency. Its intention is to go to the lowest frequency, delta, which is sleep. But between alpha consciousness and delta sleep is theta. So as you're going to bed, just as you're nodding off, the brain is now in theta. This is a record mode. So if you put subliminal tapes on using earphones, and as you're going to bed, have a subliminal tape playing programs, as you're going to bed and you go through that window of theta, the information from the tape is being downloaded in the subconscious. So you play these tapes for a little period of time, and guess what? Unconsciously, you've been reprogramming the subconscious. And it's easy, but it still takes a little bit of time. The second way of reprogramming the subconscious is, how did the subconscious learn after we were 7? Before 7, it was in a state of hypnosis, but we learn things after 7. And I go, yeah, to learn something for the subconscious after 7 requires repetition. It's called the habit mind. You create a habit by practice and repetition. So I say, for example, around the time you were 7 or so, you started to learn the alphabet. And I go, how'd you learn the alphabet? And he said, well, you repeated it every day. You started with A, B, C, D. Okay. A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. And then you repeated it and repeated it until you got from A to Z. And now I said, well, what happened when you repeated it to the point that you got from A to Z? And the answer is, now your subconscious mind has a program. It will always be there. So the second way of changing the programs in the subconscious mind is to create a new habit. And that is, there's not a sticky note on the refrigerator. That's not a habit. That's a wish. A habit is something that you purposely repeat as a practice, and you repeat it, and then it will automatically program itself through repetition. So first way of changing subconscious is actually hypnosis. Second way of changing subconscious, repetition. And still those are long periods of effort. And now I want to introduce the most significant change in our understanding of programming. It's called energy psychology, or belief change modifications. These are programs or modalities that allow a super learning experience and an opportunity to download information and change programs in minutes. You can rewrite a subconscious program 5 or 10 minutes in a super learning state. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, this is a new technology. And I go, interesting. Nate, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, our world is going through an evolutionary upheaval, and guess what? We have to change our behavior very, very quickly at this point in order to sustain our lives here. And so it's interesting because in this moment of need, these new modalities have arisen that allow us to rapidly change the programs in the subconscious mind using a super learning process. I've listed many of these modalities on my website, which is simple, brucelipton.com. And on this website, under resources, you can find 20 or more of these new modalities of changing program. And then I say, well, what's the relevance? And then we just step back to our original conversation. If I stop talking, we'll get back to it. But the original conversation was creating the honeymoon. And I say, living from wishes and desires. And that's why I say, yes, take the programming you got during the first 7 years and reprogram it to support your wishes and desires. The result is when your mind starts to go off into thought and you default into the subconscious, those programs will continue to take us toward wishes and desires. And this is the most exciting part, because when you reprogram, you can have a honeymoon experience, not just for that short period, but for every day of your life. And this is the movement toward something new, something where we can control our lives and take back the power, because we have so many powers. And as I said, but the developmental programming, we bought programs from other people, and psychologists say, yes, those programs are basically disempowering and self-sabotaging. So inevitably, when we're not being conscious, we're sabotaging our lives. And this is why we have to wake up for this right now.
Yeah, listening to you speak, it reminded me of a quote by Michael J. Fox. You might know him as
Yes.
He's a Family Ties and Back to the Future actor, and struggling with Parkinson's disease. And saw an interview with him, and he said, I learned the difference between acceptance and resignation, and I can accept that I have Parkinson's disease. I don't have to be resigned to stay that way forever.
This is really critical. Yes. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, just listening to you is like, okay, yes, we have these habits of, and I think a lot of people think, okay, a habit, I learned to ride a bike, that's a habit. I learned to drive a car, that's a habit. Brush my teeth, that's a habit. But, we have these habits of emotion, we have these habits of thought, and, we can accept that, okay, maybe things aren't the way we want them now, but we don't have to be resigned, stay that way forever. And you've given us these tools to, showing us how we can start reprogramming and changing the habits.
Right, and you're right. It's not just the physical things like riding a bike and walking and stuff like that. It's the relationship. How do you create a relationship? Well, as an infant, how do you know? And the answer is, well, you look at your parents. They have a relationship, and you observe how they respond. And what do? You download that behavior. So it's not just, the physical things as we talked about, but it's every character of life that we need to understand to be a functional member of society is downloaded from other people. Now, here's a very important part, Craig. I said that the programming is up to 7 years of age, and what's really interesting is the programming starts even before you're born. It starts in the last trimester of pregnancy, and it's been suggested that the experiences of the fetus during that developmental period actually program 50% of our personality. So even before you're born, you already started to get programming, and then you say, yeah, but the programming goes from there until 7, and then you say, but I don't know what the programs are. Why? Well, if I ask you, hey, Craig, tell me the program you learned when you were 1 year old. And you go, I don't know what the program was. I wasn't conscious. I said, yeah, conscious begins around 7. So most of us are now stuck in a situation because I say, are your programs supporting you or are they not supporting you? And you say, but I don't know what the programs are. And then here comes I want to help people because this is the cool part. 95% of your life comes from the subconscious programs. Consequently, your life is a printout of the programs. Basically, what it says is what comes easy to you and that you like in your life, the things that come into your life that you really like and they're easy, are there because you have programs that encourage them to be there. In contrast, anything you're looking for trying hard to get, putting a lot of effort in, sweating over to make it happen, I ask, why are you working so hard to make it happen? And then the answer inevitably is because the programs in your subconscious do not support that coming into your life. So you look at your life, it's a printout of your program, and you find the easy things that come in are supported by your programs. And the programs that do not support you are expressed through the fact that those things that you're looking for are difficult to get there. The difficulty is because you're conflicting with a program that doesn't support that. So what's really cool is you don't have to go to a psychoanalysis, psychologist. You don't have to go back over who did what to who and shaped your life. You just look at your life at the current moment and say, what is it I'm having trouble with? And then inevitably I say, yeah, because you have a program that doesn't support that. And all of a sudden it's, now it's easy. I can reprogram myself by just looking at what I'm looking for that I can't get. And then recognize the reason most likely is that your subconscious programming that you got during that period from 0 to 7 doesn't support that. And this saves us a lot of time and a lot of aggravation. You don't have to go and review your life in details and who did what to who, which actually in many cases makes things worse because you're reliving those experiences. Let go of the past, look at the current moment. Ask yourself, what is it that I'm trying to find that I can't get? And then start to recognize, almost inevitably, the reason for you not being able to get that is because you don't have programs to support that. And all of a sudden it says, oh, good, now I know exactly what I want to reprogram. And using something like those energy psychology modalities, in short time, 10 minutes, you can change these beliefs. And this is the most exciting thing. This is why I get so excited about all this is like, yeah, the old belief change is hard and difficult, which is true, was difficult because we didn't understand that the subconscious mind learned in a different way and depended on the conscious mind's learning to change the subconscious, which turns out that doesn't happen. That's why we feel so disempowered, why it's so hard to change our beliefs, because we were approaching the subconscious in the wrong way. And if we understand the right way to program the subconscious, then all of a sudden life gets easy. And the result is reprogram the subconscious mind, put wishes and desires in it. And whether you're paying attention or you're not paying attention, you will inevitably find heaven on earth.
Oh, Bruce, this has been incredible information, and it's just kind of the tip of the iceberg, to turn a phrase there. Everybody, you need to go to brucelipton.com. If you go to resources, you'll see it there at the top. It's a pull-down bar. If you go to other resources, click on that, and in the index on the top of that page, you'll see belief change and energy psychology modalities, and that'll get you to all these different techniques that Bruce has been talking about that'll help you create this and manifest this change in your life. And, go through them, find one that is, resonates with you, and start working with it, research it, find out more about it. Also, you'll see on his website events. Bruce, you seem to be all over the world, so there's probably somewhere where you're going to be able to, that Bruce is going to be close enough that you can get to and hear him and do a workshop and do an evening with Bruce, and because this was just basically almost like 45 minutes, 50 minutes. Can you imagine spending a couple hours and maybe a day-long workshop with Bruce? It'd be incredible. The books are The Honeymoon Effect, The Science of Creating Heaven on Earth, The Biology of Belief, the major bestseller, Biology of Belief, Unleashing the Power of Consciousness, Matter, and Miracles. And the other book is Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future and a Way to Get There from Here. Bruce, thank you so much. This has been so much incredible information in such a short time, and so I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all that you're doing.
Craig, I absolutely appreciate what you're doing, because we're going through a time of evolutionary upheaval, and the way out of the problems that we face every day, because when we read the papers and everything, we see all the crises that are affecting us, is to recognize that the way we were programmed to live has led to these crises, and that science has recognized that human behavior is responsible for all this. And so all of a sudden it says, then the emphasis to go from where we are to the world that we really want is to understand how to change this behavior. And that you're offering people new thought, new ideas outside the box is the most important part of evolution, because the answers for our successful future are not in the box. They're looking for new answers outside the box. And therefore, I really want to extend my appreciation to you for offering your audience an opportunity to see another world, another opportunity, a place that we can thrive into the future. So I want to thank you.
Oh, thank you, Butch. I mean, anytime I can hang out with cool people like you, it's not really work. So, thank you for coming on. And I know you're super busy. Just looking at your events page, you're super busy. So I appreciate taking the time. And everybody, BruceLipton.com is the place to go. And there's take some time to hang out there, because there's lots of great stuff to read and to listen to and to research. So, Bruce, thank you so much for being here.
I thank you, and I really, again, want to thank your audience as well, because each one of your audience represents cultural creatives, meaning that these people in your audience are looking for other answers, and that's where our success will come from, answers outside the box.